Well, we have ultimately finished the third book. And today we thought of discussing what we have written in this book. I don't know whether you read the book and how many read the book, or whether you understood what was in the book. Anyone who read the book and found anything difficult to understand? You can ask now if you have. It is very important to understand that today, when people talk about meditation, they use two words, samatha and vipassana. Two words that are being used. And most people think that these are two different kinds of meditation. But the fact is that these are not two different kinds of meditation. Because the teaching of the Buddha comes in four stages of four levels of practice. What we call saddha, sila, samadhi and panya. Saddha, Sila, Samadhi and Panya. These are four important words that you should remember. And as I have said earlier, instead of remembering English words, we should learn to remember Pali words. Because the English words, different people translate in different ways. And most of these translations do not really convey the meaning. So it is very important to know the Pali word and know the meaning of the Pali word. It is because people memorize English words, and when I use a different English word, people begin to think I am distorting the Dhamma. That is the mistake. I am trying to correct the translation of the Pali word. That is not distorting the Dhamma, that is distorting the common translations which mislead people. So it is very important to know the Pali word. Now when we use the word suffering, that word suffering will convey a certain meaning to the reader. But the word dukkha doesn't convey the same meaning. That is why I use the word it's the word dukkha really is the word, what is the word? Insecurity, that's right. The word insecurity. The insecurity is a very important word to understand because it is the insecurity of life that makes people seek religion. All religion is based on this insecurity of life. Life is insecure because if we look into the modern TV channels, there is a channel where they show animals. What is that channel that show animals? They show, when they show the animals, we are able to see that every animal has to go in search of food. Now we also have to go in search of food all the time. Why? If we don't take food, we die. That is the insecurity of life. To keep on living, we need food. Not only food, we also need to drink water. If we don't drink water, we die. And not only that, we also have to breathe. If we don't have oxygen to breathe, we die. And we must also have the proper temperature. If it is too hot or too cold, we die. So this is the insecurity of life. So when we see the animals going in search of food, what happens? What do we see? If you have been observing these pictures on TV, one important thing that you will see is when one animal is going in search of food, that animal becomes the food of another animal. So going in search of food is also something that can lead to death. And if we believe that this world was created by a God, this God has done a big mistake. Because one animal lives by eating other animals. Even human beings are doing the same thing. Human beings also eat other animals. And not only that, even if human beings are vegetarians, what is being a vegetarian? Eating plants. And what is eating plants? Plant is also a life. Human beings don't live by eating non-living, inanimate things. We don't eat stones and rocks. We are all the time eating other lives. Is this the way God has created the world? If God created the world, He has created suffering now. So this is why in Buddhism we don't believe that God created the world. If anyone created the world, that all-powerful person is called Mara. In Buddhism, Mara. What is the meaning of that word, Mara? Mara means death. Or if we are referring to a person, then it should be called killer. So Mara is killer or death. Because every person who is born in the world, not only human beings, even animals and even plants, every living organism has to die. To be born is to die. Have you ever met a person who is living forever? No. And why are these religions they all talk about going to heaven? What is heaven? Heaven is supposed to be a place where there is no death and there is happiness forever. Why is heaven seen as a place where there is happiness and no death? Because what we are having in this world is unhappiness and death. To be free from this world of unhappiness and death, we are trying to run into a world where there is no unhappiness and no death. What is that world? Has anyone seen that world? Has anyone met a person coming from that world? No one has seen this. But they all believe this. Why? That is a dream world. We want to believe that. Why? To overcome this feeling of insecurity. It is to overcome this feeling of insecurity that we are believing in things that we have never seen. We have no proof. The only proof is, if there is any, that proof will be after death, not before death. And if the proof is after death, so we are believing in something that we have never seen or known. That is an escape into a fantasy. We are running away from reality into a fantasy. To simply overcome the feeling of insecurity. The real thing that we see and know is the insecurity of life. And all our life, what we are doing is an effort to overcome this insecurity of life. You know, most of you get up early morning to do something. What is that? You want to go and do a job. Why do you have to do jobs? To get money, to get your food, clothing, shelter, medicine. Why? Why do you want all those things? to keep on living. This is why Charles Darwin saw it as the struggle for existence. We are struggling to exist. It is a struggle to exist. That is all that we are doing. From the time we are born, we are struggling to exist. But what is existence? Existence is what is called a static concept in a dynamic reality. Reality is not static. It is changing all the time. So what is changing all the time is like a flame. If we light a candle and look at the flame, is the flame something that exists? Existence is a static concept. That means it is not changing. But it is changing all the time. The flame is a new flame every second. It's a new flame. In the same way, our body is a new body every second. Although we think it is not changing. From the time we are born, the body is changing. All the cells in the body, all the atoms in the body, everything is changing. But we notice the change only after a few years. But the body is changing all the time. The child that is born is not the young man or woman who is getting married. They are two different people. And the old man or woman who dies is different from the young man or woman who got married. Everything is changed. This is the insecurity of life. This is what Prince Siddhartha, who became a Buddha, that is what he saw. He was born as a prince with all the luxuries at that time, available at that time. But then, when he saw an old man, a sick person, and a dead corpse, he saw the realities of life. And he saw the insecurity of life. What did he do? He didn't run after gods. He didn't try to run to heaven. He began to think. And he thought, all these people everyone being subject to old age, disease and death. They are running after things that are subject to old age, disease and death. And as a result, they are suffering. Then he saw a person who had renounced the world. And he thought, he is one person who is doing something different. He is getting away from things that are subject to old age, disease and death. And he is trying to get rid of his attachments to things that are subject to old age, disease and death. He is trying to purify his mind. He began to see that the trouble is in the mind. Our mind is going in search of the impossible. The mind wants permanence in an impermanent world. And that is why the mind is suffering. So he thought the right thing to do is to let go of all these things. And he decided to let go. So he gave up his princely life, gave up his beautiful wife, gave up his newly born child, gave up his future as a king or emperor, gave up everything and learned to purify the mind, to develop the mind. So he went in search of people who are developing the mind. So it was after a long period of practicing meditation, practicing asceticism, ultimately, by completely purifying the mind, he awakened from the dream of existence. He's awakening from the dream of existence. He began to realize that he's not really existing. Because existence is a static concept in a dynamic reality. And if he is not existing, can he die? Before you can die, you have to exist. And if you are not really existing, if it is simply a dynamic process, it is like a flame. When the flame goes out, do we ask, where did the flame go? What happened to the flame? That flame doesn't go anywhere. It is an activity that stopped. An activity can start and it can stop. It cannot go anywhere. Going anywhere means it is like if you have a candle with the flame on it, you can use that candle to light another candle. So you might see that the flame here continued in the other flame. And you can use that flame to light another candle. And you can even have a row of candles. And it can be seen like the flame is moving, but the flame is not moving. It's not going anywhere. It can only start and it can stop. That's all. Yesterday, a young man came to our temple or vihara and asked me, he told me that his father died. And asked me where the father has gone. He wanted me to tell him where the father has gone. So I said, if there is a candle and there is a flame in the candle and the flame goes out And I ask you, where did the flame go? Can you answer that question? He said, no. So in the same way, your father had a body and a mind. The mind was an activity. And that activity stopped. That is all that has happened. But we like to think that that person who died has gone somewhere. So this is why we cry and lament. Even during the time of the Buddha, there was a monk who was a disciple of the Buddha, and he believed that this thing called the mind travels from one life to another. And the other monks are telling him that you are going against the teachings of the Buddha. But he didn't believe that. And even today, most people believe that the mind goes from one person to another person, maybe, and reborn. That rebirth itself is the mind traveling. But the Buddha called that monk and asked, is it true that you believe this? He said, yes. He said, I have not said so. Mind is not a thing that can travel. Mind is something that depends on conditions. And when the conditions are absent, it disappears. That is all. This is why we are thinking in terms of the person going and being born other places. But the important thing is that what we call rebirth is simply that same activity called mind is able to start another flame, like one candle lighting another candle. That is how rebirth takes place. And that depends what kind of flame will come up, depends on what is called karma. Karma simply means the kind of life we live. This is a long story. To understand how rebirth takes place. Rebirth is not a falsehood, but rebirth doesn't mean that a person continues. It is simply like the flame. A flame is a dynamic process that is going on. There is nothing static about the flame. So in the same way, the mind is also a dynamic process that is going on. And just as the flame can light another flame, the mind can continue in another body by producing another body. Even the body is a dynamic process that is going on. There is nothing static about the body. So anyway, the important thing is to understand that we are struggling to exist. We are that existence or the struggle itself can stop. That means even that continuation of the struggle in the form of a next life can come to an end. When we realize that there is no person here to continue. So we will be talking about these things as we go along. So the important thing is to read this book, and most of these things are in the book. And as you read it, you'll begin to understand these things. And because we have been talking for some time, if you have any questions, you can ask now, and we can try to discuss some of these things. Anyway, that you can think about these things, and as you begin to think, you begin to understand these things better. Well, now the problem is I can't hear you properly. Huh?
Bante, even though we read several times of this book, we read several times, we may able to understand the sentence that Bante have make it simple, but I find we are not able to realize or penetrate what Bante has written.
What? Difficult to understand.
We can understand, but difficult to realize. Because
Difficult
understanding and realization is different, right, Bante?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So, Bante, how, as a lay people like us, to realize it?
Very good.
Thank you, Bante.
Good that you asked that question. The reason for this problem that you are talking about is because we have, when we speak about the mind, we really have two minds. Most people don't know that. One mind is the thinking mind. The other mind is the emotional mind. Now the thinking mind can think, but it is the emotional mind that wants things or hates things or fears things or worries about things. That is the emotional mind. Now when you come to the temple and say take up the 5 precepts, it is the thinking mind that is doing that. But you go home and maybe you quarrel with your husband or wife or whoever, or maybe neighbors, or why is that? That is done by the emotional mind, not the thinking mind. And so, even if we understand, when you read the book, you understand everything, your understanding is done by the thinking mind. But you cannot live according to your understanding because the emotional mind goes in the opposite direction. Today, the thinking mind in the modern world is much more advanced than the primitive world. That is why we have electric lights, we have fans, we have air conditioning, we have motor vehicles to go about, we have airplanes even to fly to other countries. Now people have even gone to the moon, and now they are trying to go even beyond the moon. We have this wonderful thing called a computer. All this is because of the thinking mind. It is the thinking mind that has done all these things, wonderful things. But still, are we free from crime? Are we free from wars? Are we free from terrorism, injustice? Why all these things? Because the emotional mind is dominating the world today. The thinking mind is only a slave of the emotional mind. This is why the thinking mind has created the nuclear weapons that can even destroy the world. Because everything that the thinking mind has done is what the emotional mind wants. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that what we need is to start working according to the thinking mind and not the emotional mind. That the thinking mind should dominate the world, not the emotional mind. The emotional mind has to learn to control. The thinking mind has to learn to control the emotional mind. That is the important thing. And that is what we learn in the teachings of the Buddha. What we call meditation is learning to gain control over the emotional mind. To start working according to the thinking mind and not according to the emotional mind. And that is not an easy job. We have to keep on practicing. The first step is to understand the problem. And understanding the problem, we have to turn in a new direction. It is like if you have been going to the north, now we have to start going to the south. We have to take what is called a U-turn. We have to turn in the opposite direction. That is what we do in what is called the Noble Eightfold Path, which we translate as the supernormal eightfold way. It is supernormal because it is not the normal thing. We have to go in the opposite direction. So, first thing is Samma Ditti. We have to understand the problem. The second step is to turn in the right direction. That's why I call it the reorientation. And once we turn in the right direction, we have to start going in the right direction. So that going in the right direction means we have to control our behavior. So the behavior control is what is called sila. And then we have to gain control over our emotions. The emotions must be controlled. And that is what is called samadhi. And ultimately we have to change the way we think, to transform the thinking part, because it is the thinking part that ultimately gains control over the emotions. So it is by changing the thinking that we can control the emotions. So, That is the final step. So, when we practice the supernormal eightfold way, so we gradually begin to go in the right direction. That is the meaning of that. All that is in this book. You read the book and you begin to understand that.
Bhante, in the beginning you said usually we perceive samatha and vipassana to be two different types of meditation. But
These
can you
are not
clarify
two
they are
types of meditation.
Yeah, can you clarify?
These are two parts of the same meditation. So samatha is to first gain control over our emotions. That is the samatha meditation. When the mind is calmed down, then we can change our thinking. So, changing the thinking is the vipassana. So that is how we do it.
When does this Panya actually come out?
Again, you have to come here.
When you talk about this vipassana, all these things, okay,
I don't hear you properly.
I just are wondering when does this Panya actually kick in to...
Instead of?
No, when someone is practicing the samatha and vipassana meditation. So, and as why you mentioned that the vipassana is where it enable you to change your thinking, the way of your thinking, or these things. So, what about this panya? When does it come in to your this mind? Actually, when does it kick?
I didn't understand what you are trying to say.
When does this actually this panya come in to, like, how to say that, is enable your mind to see the reality of things, all these things?
Panya is, what did you say?
When does this panya actually arise in our mind? When does it actually arise?
Panya is to simply change the way you think. Panya really means something like intelligence. It's the intellect or the thinking faculty.
It is also a factor that enable you to realize the truth also. Can I say that? The panya. To see the reality of things.
The panya, we start with the panya and end with the panya. Because the first thing is the samma ditti, the harmonious perspective. That means we have to first understand the problem. Then we begin to gain control over the emotions first. But that is only a temporary control of the emotion. When the emotion calms down. And then we begin to use panya again to change our thinking.
So this panya is come together with the introspection, can I say that?
Oh yes, introspection is what we begin to do to change our emotions also and calm the mind. And then the introspection also helps us to change our thinking part.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante. I got another question.
Yeah.
When you mentioned about that this body is a dynamic process, so can I say that the things, whatever things we see now, as like this scenery, what we see this in this classroom, also is a dynamic process? It keep on changing. Can I say that? Just on.
I didn't understand that fully what you are trying to say.
As what you mentioned just now, that our body is like the flame, which is keep on changing.
Yeah.
So if let's say I want to extend out the scope, that means that whatever we see, whatever we hear, smell, everything is also keep on changing. Can I say that it's like a flame also? So it just arise, just go, just arise, and just go like that. The world, the external world, what we perceive, also is keep on changing. Can I say that?
Now that process of perception itself has to be properly understood by becoming aware of it. A direct awareness of the process of perception becomes necessary. And that can happen only when the mind is properly calmed down. When the mind is not calm, you can't observe that. And then only you can change. When you become fully aware of that process of perception, then you begin to understand the reality of what it is all about.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Bhante, the question which we have to ask ourselves, the question that we have to ask ourselves is the practice. When we are practicing what we learn, we are actually exposed to a lot of conditions outside, family, work, society. How important is it for us to have a support group in terms of association with similar-minded friends for us to change our thinking and practice to review our habits and reduce the defilements that we are actually habitually having? What's your advice on this?
What you are talking about is how the society that you live in can become an obstacle to your practice. Is that what you're saying? Then?
Not really. I'm actually saying the society exists, but the society exists, but the support group of friends, associates, companions, similar in the same line with us, looking and seeking for a solution.
You want to spread the Dhamma in your society. Is that what you're trying to say?
Not really. I'm talking more in terms of Kalyana Mitta. Kalyana Mitta, like good friendship. How important is it in the practice?
how your practice is important in influencing other people.
No.
Then?
I'm talking about how a group of people can be actually supporting each other in the practice.
How a group of people can help one another.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that is important. This is why you have to get together in this group like this. The group support becomes very important. That is why the Buddha established what is called the Sangha. The Sangha itself is a group of people who are thinking in a similar way and acting in a similar way. And when you get into that group, you also begin to act in the same way. That is what you get from the group. The group support becomes very important. That is the meaning of Sangha. So the Sangha becomes very important in the practice. This is why when once the disciple of the Buddha who is always looking after the Buddha, Ananda, he said that this practice is based on the group. That means the good companionship. He said the practice is partly based on good companionship. And the Buddha said, don't say that, Ananda. It is not a part of the practice. The entire practice is based on this group support. So that is the basis of the group support. So that is very important. Today the modern psychotherapists also make use of this group support in psychotherapy. This is a very important point that you emphasized. So that is why it is necessary to have this group here is automatically building up. So if you come regularly to listen to the Dhamma and talk about the Dhamma, you gradually get into it. This is very important. So if we don't have any more questions, we can bring this to an end today.